What was the biggest plot twist that happened in your life? I met a girl through POF and dated her for a year. She lived 6 minutes up the street from me, so we saw each other quite often. Both of us were quite introverted, so we mainly only hung out with each other. We both considered the relationship to be serious and exclusive. Anyway, right from the start of the relationship, I noticed that she would text this one guy pretty frequently. I asked her about him, and she told me that he was her tattoo artist. Just to be snoopy, I checked out the website of the place she gets her tattoos done. Sure enough, there was a tattoo artist there with the same first name as the guy in her phone, but the last name was different. I asked her about it, and she quickly called me out on being paranoid, and how it was ridiculous to think that she would lie to me. I agreed, it was pretty paranoid of me. Maybe 5 months later into the relationship, I'm on Facebook and I decide to search the name of the guy in her phone. A profile comes up in the same small city we both live in, but there is no profile picture or anything. I decide to bring it up with her again, because now there is 2 Facebook profiles. One who is actually a tattoo artist, and one who has the same name that is in her phone. She freaks out on me for bringing it up again, and tells me that I'm crazy. I agreed, but just wanted a straight answer. She told me that I had nothing to be worried about. I apologized, and we got over it. About a year into the relationship, I found her on POF. I would periodically go on there to see if she recreated her profile. We both deleted our profiles. I found a profile that I thought might be hers, but obviously no pictures. I catfished it, and it turned out to be her. She was back on POF and looking for guys. I had all the evidence I needed, and I was going to confront her with it the next day and break up with her. However, I thought that if I was going to break up with her, I was going to message this Facebook profile I had found that matched the name in her phone, just out of curiosity. Plot twist. I message the guy. He gets back to me immediately. We converse, and it turns out that he is her boyfriend. I had been her second boyfriend the entire time. She met him 2 months before she met me. She bounced back between me and him for an entire year. Neither me or him knew about each other. He saw my name in her phone once, and she said that I was her tattoo artist. Every time I ever called her out, I was right. Every time she was gone mysteriously at night, she was with him. Every time she said she was hanging out with a friend of hers, she was with him. She doesn't actually have any friends. It was always him. Anyway, we both broke up with her the next morning and met the next day to have a beer. Haven't spoken with him since. Bill was a self-made millionaire by the time he was 18 years old. That was in the mid-80s. He has been one of my best and certainly most influential friends. 25 years ago he married a girl that I did not like or trust. I told him as much, but he married her weird butt anyways. A few years ago she ran off with a guy she met at a roller skating rink. He apparently wooed her with his zooming around or whatever, and Bill was single again. He met a girl and insisted I meet her. Bill remembered that I had not approved of his ex. We met for lunch at one of those awful buffets. This girl was beautiful. She used English like a scalpel, working on PhD. She was awesome, but I noticed little things about her. She had obviously been to finishing school. Then why did she have fingernail polish on her cuticles and a dress from a 1985 resale rack? There was just a lot of details that didn't add up, and Bill was getting ready to marry her. I told Bill that I thought she was hiding something, but I didn't care. This gal was high class and hybrid. I told him she was great. Bill hadn't met her parents till the wedding. It was at their beach house in Destin. It turns out that my friend hadn't told his new bride of his formidable wealth, but she had been hiding the fact that her parents are legit billionaires. Bill deserves someone like her. At 29 years old I was diagnosed with stage IV breast cancer, terminal, which had already spread to my lungs and some ribs. Certainly changed the course of my life. Funny thing is, I went to the doctor to have my lungs checked BC I was having trouble breathing on my long runs. For 6 years prior to that the lumps in my breast had been passed off for cysts and dense breast tissue. Nothing to worry about, you're so young. Growing up, I always dreamt about marrying the cute boy that lived down the street. In 2 weeks, I'm marrying the nerdy boy that lived across the street from him. January 2011, wife pregnant. Good health. Mom alive. March 2011 through January 2012. Miscarriage. Misdiagnosis for the wife. Cousin hit by train. Mom passed away from pancreatic cancer. Wife has affair with guy she met at funeral. February 2012. Wife threw me out of the house on Valentine's Day. I had a marriage of 5 years, with 2 wonderful children, a gorgeous house, 2 cars in the driveway, and money in the bank. Then plot twist, the kids could belong to any of the other half dozen men going out with my wife. I love a good drama. This is the kind of crap that keeps me awake at night. I found my adoption papers in the family strongbox when I was 19, despite having been told my whole life that my parents were my biological parents. Quit my professional job with a 2 weeks notice letter quoting John Muir, the mountains are calling and I must go. Now I make peanuts at a ski resort. I love peanuts. I thought that was John Muir, not Robert Frost. My grandfather left my grandmother for another man after 35 years of marriage and the raising of 2 kids, a daughter, mom, and a slightly mentally disabled son, Drunkle. It messed my grandmother up pretty bad. Fast forward 16 years. My mom dies from liver failure. Me and my kid sister are young and broke. Grandmother is old and broke. Grandfather pays for everything. Nobody says anything to him. No thanks. No condolences. Nothing. I want to go see him and talk to him. Thank him. And see how he's doing. I ask my grandmother where he lives, on the grounds that he told me he had something important he needed to tell me. Pulled out of my butt, obviously. But grandmother bursts into tears and confesses that grandfather is not my mom's real father. She had a whirlwind romance with some traveling jackass conman who left her as soon as he could. Grandfather offered to marry grandmother and raise my mom as his own. Mom never knew. I was stunned. My grandmother was always really judgmental of other people and looked down on anyone else in this exact situation. She was sobbing at this point, and I snapped at her to stop because blood never really played all that heavily into what me and my sister considered family, and that she shouldn't consider it either. Anyway, that's how I found out one of my family's biggest secrets on accident, and then promptly didn't give a crap. Neat plot twist, though. It actually just happened. Playing games with a good friend who attends another school studying something I'm passionate about. I make an offhand joke that I'll transfer and make his life miserable. He asks me why not. Not even a week later, and I'm transferring to a school 2 states away where I know literally one person to study something I dreamed of studying but never actually thought could be a reality. That's pretty cool. Good luck. I struggled with my physical orientation a lot. It took me years to admit that I was gay. 10 years after coming out of the closet, I fell for a girl and it caught me completely off guard. They should make a name for when that happens. I'll share my grandma's, one of my favorites. As a young woman, she worked at a humble bakery in a small town in Australia. American soldiers were stationed in her town as they readied for deployment in the Pacific War of World War II. One day, a soldier from NYC came in and tried to order something not on the menu. His accent was very thick and she, being a Scottish immigrant, could not understand him. She was very embarrassed, but kept trying to assist him. After a couple minutes like this, the soldier got very impatient and started cussing and insulting my grandmother, the bakery, the town, etc. Well, my grandmother, a proud woman of small stature but surprising strength, came around the counter and punched that man hard in the chest. I'm told she broke one of his ribs, but that seems extreme. She definitely knocked him over. Fellow soldiers lifted the stunned soldier off the ground and back to the base where they told their CO the story. The CO panicked about ruining relations with the town and pointed to the nearest man. He asked where he was from, Illinois, and hearing no accent, sent him back to the bakery to apologize on behalf of the army. The man did a wonderful job and made a good impression, and he went back to that town after the war, and he married my grandma and they lived happily ever after. They eventually moved back to the States, but she refused to ever visit NYC. TLDR. Big misunderstanding leads to big love. Had a mad crush on this girl in high school. We spent a lot of time together in school but not outside because her mom was strict and girl had a boyfriend. We part ways after graduation, meet a couple years later, find out she had a mad crush on me. 2. We hook up. I find out she is juggling several guys and I get pee. I stop talking to her for a month. She tells me she misses me. I ignore her. She dies in a car accident the next day. Messed me up for years. I was pursuing this woman that I worked with and she was playing along and flirting back with me. She would often just gaze at me and hold eye contact with me in a very seductive way. I was totally hooked on her until this one day. She confessed to me that she was married to a woman. I moved from California to Chicago after a year of doing nothing after finishing school. Lived with a friend for a bit, then found an apartment in the city with some roommates. Got a perfect job in the field I went to school for. Almost 2 months to the day after I moved into the city, I went on a date that ended in me getting meningococcal meningitis. Spent 2 weeks in a coma. 2 months in a Chicago hospital. Was sent back to California on a medical flight where I spent 2 more months in a hospital. Lost 8 of my fingers and both of my legs. And now, 2 years later, I'm still recovering with near constant setbacks. TLDR. Thought I was starting a new life, and I did, but not the one I thought I would. This is kind of mine, and kind of my mom's. When I was a kid, I moved to a different state, and eventually made friends with a girl at my new school. We eventually ended up having a sleepover at my place one night. In the morning, her mom came over to pick her up and get to know my mom and me. When our moms got to talking, they discovered that not only were they from the same state, that nobody involved had lived in for at least 10 years, but that they had played together as kids at the same church. 13 years ago I was a global manager for a major tech company when my wife suddenly passed away, leaving me alone with 3 young children. I retired from my job and spent the next decade focusing on my family. I remarried, had more kids and adopted still more. We have 8 in all. I am now a manager at a volunteer clinic, helping those who can't find or afford medical care. I finished up college this spring and had a job lined up to be a software developer. Currently, I am living in a tiny town in Spain teaching English. Was planning to be a zoologist. Nope, now I too want to be an English professor teaching in another country. I have one that is straight out of a freaking soap opera and I am fully ready to accept people calling bulls on it, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. I was very good friends with a guy in high school named John, who was dating a lovely guy named Janie Polish or something. I can't recall, but that's sort of irrelevant, and was madly in love with him. He carried Janie's picture around in his wallet and every time they were together they were super sweet. Really adorable couple. Then, one day, Janie starts acting really strange and distant. Doesn't answer John's phone calls. Doesn't spend time with us. The whole works. He flat out broke up with John and broke the poor guy's heart. I brought a spare t-shirt for a few days because my shoulder would be soaked from him crying on it. And then it got even worse. John called me one afternoon after school and begged me to come over because he needed a friend. When I got there he told me that Janie had been killed in a car accident and he was absolutely devastated all over again. I went with him to the funeral a few days later for moral support and he was just broken. Spent a couple of weeks just moping and being depressed. And here comes the plot twist. Are you ready for this crap? He gets a freaking call from Janie. He had a twin brother that we never knew about who was apparently a big troublemaker and had been sent off to boarding school. When he'd been home to visit last they'd swapped places for some reason that I never found out. Either simply for a laugh or for some other reason I never knew. But they did. His twin was the one that had been avoiding John and broke up with him. And he had been drinking and doing drugs before he got into the accident that killed him. Janie had been off at boarding school so he wasn't able to make it back for the funeral, and when he did get home he had to work up his nerve for a few days to tell his parents what they had done, which led to them realizing that the child they thought was dead is actually alive and vice versa, which led to some fun family complications, not the least of which being obituary retractions, headstone replacement and lots of screaming apparently. Meanwhile, John and him had a whirlwind romance afterwards in a giddy fit of reunited bliss. But it fizzled out after a month or so because John was furious after the reality sank in at what Janie had done without telling him and letting him be so miserable all that time. Not to mention letting him think that he'd died. I was the third party observer in all this, but to this day it's probably the most unbelievable thing that's ever happened in my life. Was sure I'd never marry because no one wanted me. Met my now wife and realized that I'd been listening to old tapes my parents had planted in my head. They did everything they could to strip me and my siblings of every last shred of self-respect. 17 years later, I've been married for 15 years. I have 2 children by marriage and 3 grandchildren. My life is awesome. I went from gonna die alone to the patriarch of my family. Best plot twist ever. Okay, should have made this clear in the OP. My wife is older than I am and had 2 grown children when we married. They were 17 and 21. They're now turning 34 and 38. Yes, technically, they are my stepchildren. But Bearded popped smoke and hit the eject button when I came into the picture and basically hasn't been seen since, although he does live about 15-20 minutes away. My son calls me dad, and my daughter refers to my wife and I as her parents, so I am dad. I am certainly my granddaughter's papa. I've held each one of them on the day they were born, and have been a constant presence in all their lives. I've changed diapers and wiped butts and read to them. We all live about 10 minutes from each other, and it's a rare 2 or 3 days that go by that I don't see at least one of my kids, their spouses, and my grandkids. Spend over a year planning and saving for the launch of a few businesses. Plot twist. Get drunk one day and make a joke website 6 figures within the month. Now I'm actually working on my businesses with launch dates coming soon. Hint, it was telling people to eat a bag of dongs. Told this before and will again. I was a little goth girl in HS and secretly had a mad crush on an upperclassman that was a wrestler and did cross country. My cousin, who was Miss Socialite, also had a crush on him and hit on him constantly. He and I were complete opposites. We rode the same bus and I was pretty sure I was invisible to him. So one day his friends start picking on me. He gets up from the front of the bus, moves to where his buddies and I are, sits down next to me, throws his arm around me, and they stop. This pisses off my cousin as he and I become friends and he constantly ignores our advances. She later on goes on to have me expelled by saying I had a bomb and was going to blow up the school, because she didn't like this or that her BF and I were close friends. This ruined every friendship I had, except the one with her crush. He and I remained friends even after he moved away and then closer friends when he moved back. Today he and I are going on 4 years together. We bought a house and car, had a daughter, and are working on plans to build our next and probably permanent home. 10 years later the bee is still greener than a Granny Smith apple. Thought everyone had extreme mood swings and crazy periods of time. Then bam. Bipolar I with severe depression. Now happy on meds and feeling more normal and in control of my emotions. I didn't know I had really bad anxiety until recently. I seriously thought it was normal and just what nervousness or stress felt like because I've had it for as long as I can remember. Had a child with a woman I didn't love. Gave up my entire life to move states to try and give it a go. Became depressed and made the decision to move back home after realizing it just wasn't working. She filed for child support, and thus began the gauntlet of her parents reminding me of how I abandoned my son and family and that I was a piece of crap. Ex wouldn't let me talk to my son unless I paid child support and additional expenses, which I did because what did I know about being a father at 23? Still made monthly drives to see my son because I loved him. She became increasingly addicted to drugs and moved my son from state to state, turning to family members she could leech from. Parents told me I would never see my son again because I don't deserve him. I sued for sole custody, won, and I'm currently owed $60,000 in back child support and lawyer fees. She's been held in contempt 4 times, and we have a compliance hearing coming up on the 10th. She doesn't attempt to speak to my son, now 6. He wasn't yet 4 the last time they spoke, and current girlfriend of 5 years is referred to as mom. Being dumped by my GF of 2 years on a cruise ship. She dumped me midweek of a week-long cruise. Her family and grandparents were also on board. It was beyond weird. We had a king-size bed. I came back to 2 twin beds. The last 72 hours on that ship was really long, but I still managed to find fun. I get that she probably needed to get that off her chest, but what a terrible place to break up. Although I topped my school when I was 15, my parents were not in financial condition to send me for further education. I was supposed to do a technical course and work as a AC mechanic or something. But then a social worker from our town heard that I topped the school, sponsored all my education until I complete engineering in electronics and communication. Now I work at one of the major IT company which pays heck lot of salary which I never dreamt. The man runs a charitable trust and sponsor many students who cannot afford higher education. I'm part of the trust now and he is my silver line. My family and I were driving home from dinner and were hit head on by an older man having a diabetic episode. My wife and 7-year-old stepson died but my 15-month-old son and myself survived. I was 27 at the time and figuring out the whole single dad thing is still a challenge. I am 30 now. My son will be 4 soon and we're both doing pretty good. What happened gave me a whole new respect for life. I started working out. So far 75 pounds down. Just started dating recently. Dating is a freaking nightmare and made a career change that I really like. It was a horrid situation but I feel I'm making the best of it. I worked in morning radio, and I was also an accomplished bowler. One day I mentioned something about a high score I had and a listener called in to challenge me because he had just bowled a perfect game the week before. We worked out the details and since we had the same first name I said loser has to legally change their name for 1 year to whatever the winner wanted. We had an attorney ready to donate the time for the paperwork. The guy refused to agree to those terms. He was up for anything, but wouldn't do the legal name change. So we decided to do loser gets a tattoo of the winner's choosing. My idea was better, but I digress. So the challenge was set. One game the next day for the tattoo. Our studio was next to a bowling alley so we were able to set it up so that we started in the studio in the first hour of the show, bowled in the second hour, and got the tattoo in the third hour. I designed my tattoo and got it to an artist. She made a stencil so she could tattoo fast and make for better radio. I threw the first 9 strikes in a row. He missed a spare in the first. I didn't even finish the game. I would have had somewhere between a 269 and a perfect game. He couldn't score higher than 200. So we go and get the tattoo on this guy like 10 minutes after I embarrassed him on live radio. The tattoo is me riding Falca. I green screened myself in the Atreyu pose and photoshopped me into the actual movie poster. The artist had a perfect stencil made. The tattoo is finished and the detail is unbelievable. We all have a great laugh and I only see this guy one other time in my life. Plot twist: the last I heard he was in jail for violating a 13-year-old. His second debitory conviction. He couldn't legally change his name because he was a registered diddler. So there is a diddler in prison somewhere with a tattoo of me riding Falca on his bicep. I'm the only person in the world with that story. Last July, I went in for stomach surgery. I was overconfident and had not a worry in the world about it. The doctor nicked a vein inside me and closed me up with a slow internal bleed. They brought me out of slumber and I found myself with growing difficulty breathing. While still being sure that I couldn't possibly die, I felt myself die. I woke up the next day in the ICU, still with no real idea what happened. I had died twice and been brought back with CPR. I still have a hard time believing that I consciously experienced death. I'm 31 years old and have always been very healthy. I just spent 2 hours a day for the last 3 days getting a steroid infusion at the hospital because I apparently have MES. No one in my family has ever had it. My entire future suddenly has the potential to be very different than I ever imagined. Don't give up. My dad has had MES for 23 years and he raised 2 children, owns his own home and has a successful career as an engineer. He was only 25 or so when he was diagnosed. I know it's hard. I've watched it all. The experimental treatments, the hope, the disappointment, frustration and anger. Just don't give up. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.